My name is David Lopez, and I'm just an average office worker. My life is pretty mundane. I go back and forth between work and home every day without anything exciting to talk about. Initially, I had dreams of advancing in my career. But my personality isn't suited for strategic moves, so I often end up with tasks that no one else wants. My inability to refuse assignments works against me. Despite working hard, I remain a regular employee without any notable title. There was a time when I was much happier and smiled more. I married my girlfriend, whom I had been dating since I started working. We had a joyful marriage that motivated me to excel in my job. However, as the years passed, my wife became frustrated with my lack of results at work. She often expressed her irritation, saying, "I'm sorry, I'm doing my best." But she would respond, "How many years and how many times have you said that?" She had hoped marrying me would lead to a better life. But with my low salary, she felt restricted. Mary loved spending on herself, from beauty treatments to clothes. She thought life would be luxurious because I'm a doctor's son, and my father owned a clinic. However, my father, much like me, had a similar personality. He often charged patients minimal fees and provided care without profit, especially for those struggling financially. He believed people would repay when they could, saying, "Money can't be made if you're not alive." Despite coming from a family of doctors, we never lived a wealthy life. As a child, I never felt dissatisfied or questioned this way of living, and I remain proud of my dad to this day. However, Mary decided to marry me assuming I came from a wealthy background, without knowing our true situation. This led to a life completely different from what she had envisioned, and a few years later, she had enough. "I'm done. If this is all we can do, there's no point in being with you. Let's get a divorce," Mary declared one day. "Wait, please. How long do you think I've waited? I'm aging just like you. I need to start over while I still can. I definitely don't want to be a low-income wife like you for the rest of my life," she added harshly, leaving behind only divorce papers. I was angry at myself for not recognizing Mary's true nature and for not being able to prove her wrong with my job performance. 5 years passed, during which I threw myself into work to heal emotional wounds, but my lack of savvy kept me from excelling, leaving me a regular employee. If this continued, what Mary said would come true. I felt utterly miserable. Then, an envelope arrived in my mailbox from Mary. Inside was a wedding invitation. Mary, my ex-wife, whom I hadn't heard from in a long time, was remarrying someone else. Why would my ex-wife send me an invitation? I wondered, noticing the name of a familiar chapel on the postcard. This place, isn't it a super luxurious hotel? Knowing Mary, she must have chosen a wealthy man as her new partner, planning to flaunt her happiness at a lavish hotel wedding just to emphasize the difference between her life now and our life together. I demurred my attendance. I was the one who got dumped, I thought. But maybe from Mary's perspective, my lack of career success was an unexpected turn of events. After pondering for a while, I sighed deeply and stood up from my seat. This is the last time. I guess I'll just go. Despite knowing attending the wedding would hurt my pride, I decided to go anyway. Perhaps, despite everything, Mary had stayed by my side for several years, even if reluctantly. I could somewhat understand her desire to show me that she's fine and finally happy, as a form of revenge. To an outsider, she might appear kind-hearted. Nevertheless, I chose to attend her wedding. On the day of the wedding, the weather was perfect. I arrived a bit early and sat in the lounge, sipping coffee and staring out of the window. Since it was Mary's second wedding, I recognized a few of her friends whom I had met before. Unexpectedly, I overheard a conversation from the seat next to me. After all, Mary did an amazing job to get this wedding, didn't she? Yeah, it's in a luxury hotel this time. It's a step up from the first one. She used to complain that her first husband was a doctor's son, but when she lifted the lid, he was just an ordinary office worker without money. It's really unexpected, isn't it? Hearing them talk about me without realizing I was there, I felt a sharp pain in my heart. So Mary never truly liked me for who I was. I had realized that when we got divorced, but hearing it from someone else made it even harder. Before she divorced her first husband, she had already set her sights on her current husband. "Really well done, Mary. Well calculated," they said. I couldn't believe my ears. So that meant Mary was already in a relationship with her current partner before she even divorced me. My pride was shattered into pieces. She looked down on me so much. But she was the one who was cheating. I started regretting even being at the wedding. Trying to maintain composure, I took another sip of my coffee, but my hand was shaking. Then Mary appeared in front of me, all prepared to move to the bridal room. "You really came. You're really a good person, right?" she sneered at me. With a sigh, trying to hold back my anger, I responded, "Consider it my last duty." "Glad you could find happiness." I forced a smile, not liking my own attitude. Mary continued to belittle me. "Isn't it wonderful? It's incomparable to the time with you. Here's a share of happiness for the poor bachelor. Be grateful, will you?" She laughed sarcastically. Just then, a refreshing-looking man spoke to her from behind. It was the groom, her new husband, Richard. "Mary, it seems like the relatives have gathered. Let's hurry to the bridal room," he said. Her husband glanced at me briefly and gave a slight nod. I reflexively nodded back. As Richard and Mary were about to pass by me, Richard spoke with a pleasant smile. "There's still some time before the ceremony. Please make yourself comfortable." Just then, an older man following Richard, who I assumed was his father, approached me. "Excuse me for asking, but may I have your name?" Feeling uneasy under his serious gaze, I replied, "My name is David Lopez." "Is your father a doctor by any chance?" the groom's dad suddenly asked, appearing frantic. Staggering a bit under his intense presence, I nodded in response to his question. Immediately, the color drained from the groom's dad's face, and he raised his voice. "Richard, the wedding is off right now." "What? Dad, what are you talking about?" Richard looked caught off guard by this sudden declaration. Panicked and confused by this unexpected turn of events, I hurriedly stood up from my seat, insisting, "No, I didn't do anything." Ignoring the commotion around us, the groom's dad began to prostrate himself at my feet. The people around us started murmuring and stirring in confusion. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Please, lift your head," Richard urged his father. But his dad remained bowed down, pressing his forehead to the floor without changing his posture. I was completely lost and had no idea what was happening. Caught in this embarrassing situation, Mary turned red with anger and started to lash out. "Can we just talk about this? Lift your head, please." Trying to calm the situation, I persuaded the groom's dad to lift his head. With tears in his eyes, he pleaded for forgiveness, saying, "I'm begging for your forgiveness. I've been unfaithful to Dr. Lopez." It seemed that Charles, the groom's dad, had some past connection with my dad, and this connection was crucial to understanding the truth behind the unfolding drama. I listened intently as Charles began to speak, his words hesitant yet filled with emotion. He explained that he and my father were fellow doctors, and the story he recounted dated back to my early childhood. At that time, Charles was a trainee doctor at the hospital where my dad had recently started his own medical practice. My father was highly respected for his skills, having trained at a renowned university hospital. Charles, attending the Associated Medical School, looked up to my dad and volunteered to train at his hospital to learn various techniques. One day, Charles's wife gave birth, but sadly, the baby was found to have a congenital heart defect. The required heart surgery was risky, and other doctors were hesitant to perform it due to low chances of survival. Desperate, Charles turned to my dad for help. My father agreed to perform the heart surgery and successfully saved the baby's life. However, the medical expenses for such a procedure were substantial, and as a trainee doctor at that time, Charles couldn't afford to pay it all at once. Tears streaming down his face, Charles bowed deeply and asked my dad if he could repay the amount in installments. My dad simply laughed and shook his head, saying, "Someday, when you become a great doctor and have the means, come back and repay me. I guarantee you'll definitely become a great doctor." After this incident, Charles was sent abroad to study medicine and didn't return for several years. However, he never forgot his promise to my dad and continued to save money for the repayment. As Charles shared this story with tears in his eyes, it became clear why he was so deeply affected upon learning my identity. His heartfelt commitment to fulfilling his debt to my father showed the profound impact my dad had on his life and career. As Charles continued his story, he explained that upon returning to the United States, he discovered that my dad's hospital had closed down, and their contact information had changed, leading to a loss of touch between them. The weight of being unable to repay the debt had burdened him for years, and upon seeing me at the hotel and noting my resemblance to my dad, he was overcome with emotion. "I'm truly sorry. Please, I'm begging you, Let me meet your dad in person and apologize to him, Charles pleaded, his emotions intense. Feeling Charles's deep sincerity, I responded calmly, "That sounds just like something my dad would do. But my dad has already passed away." Upon hearing this news, Charles stood there in shock. "No way, he passed away from cancer just like that, 3 years ago," he said, his voice filled with sorrow. He went on to describe how my dad had continued working tirelessly in various clinics until the end, always putting his patients first. Overwhelmed with emotion, Charles knelt on the floor, breaking down in tears. "Dad, this isn't the place," Richard the groom said, clearly affected by the revelation. "That scar on your chest, that's proof that Dr. Lopez saved your life," Charles explained to Richard, who seemed at a loss for words. "You're able to have a wedding ceremony and be here today, all thanks to Dr. Lopez," Charles continued, bowing to me again. "I want to repay all the kindness that I couldn't repay to your dad." In that moment, I gently lifted Charles's face and extended my hand to help him stand up. "Mr. Charles, I'm really happy just remembering my dad is enough for me," I assured him. "The life my dad saved is now able to celebrate such a wonderful day like today. Being able to connect with proof of my dad's existence brings me happiness, and I'm sure my dad would be happy too." As I expressed these feelings, Charles started crying loudly again, and there were cheers and applause from the onlookers. However, Mary was the only one glaring at me with fury. As the time for the ceremony drew near, it proceeded as scheduled. I had undergone an unexpected experience, and my wounded heart had transformed into feelings of pride and brightness. Afterward, Charles insisted on repaying the medical expenses and the kindness my dad had shown. I ended up receiving a substantial amount of money that he had saved for my dad. Furthermore, Charles's hospital began doing business with my company, significantly boosting my performance, and I finally got promoted. The kindness and compassion my dad had shown had come back to me in such a meaningful way. I cherished this happiness while recalling the serious look in my dad's eyes when he was working. As for Mary, although she was enjoying her second marriage, her husband eventually found out about her past relationship with me and realized that both her previous and current marriages were motivated by money. This led to another divorce for her. I heard about it through the grapevine, and it reminded me of the saying, "What goes around comes around." Like my dad, I live my life believing that even if something doesn't directly benefit me, it could still contribute to someone else's happiness. Today, seeing someone smile again assures me that my life is definitely heading in the right direction. The exchange was deeply emotional, bridging past debts with present gratitude and bringing closure to a chapter of unfinished business between Charles and my late father.